Hi there, I'm Katrina German, and I am very excited to be interviewing Suzanne Paschall today. She is a she's a two-time author, owned a former publishing company, and she is now doing an online training for people to kind of decide which direction they want to be going in, whether it's self-publishing or going to a formal publisher. She's also done a lot she's an ambassador to the Crowdfunding Association of Canada, and she's done some really amazing work. Suzanne is coming to us from Seattle and has agreed to basically give us some tips on how to get published. So Suzanne, let's just begin with the question, which is the right direction to go in, self-publishing, or is it better, to try to go with a traditional publisher?
Well, it's a great question, and it's probably by far the single most often asked question I get. And basically what I tell people is that it completely depends on you and your project. And because there's a whole range of skills and activities that need to be undertaken to publish a book, there's sort of this big continuum, right? I would say that if you're likely to be interested in self-publishing, you're probably the kind of person who has a lot of skills related to marketing, sales, distribution, promotion, all of those things. And you really have a sense that you want to have a lot of business and creative control over your product. And you have some money to spend because it's not free to do it. On the opposite end of that continuum, people who are more interested in saying, you know what, I'm interested in writing my book, but I don't have the skills or the ability to take the time to learn or the desire to engage in learning all of those other aspects of the business part of publishing a book. I need help with that. And so there's actually that range in the middle of, working with a publication services company. And then on the far end of that continuum, the formal publisher, you're likely to want that situation if you're not as interested in all of those business aspects, and you're willing to say, okay, if they want to change my title, that's fine, or whatever. I'm not that interested in creative control necessarily, but what I really want is the name of a big traditional publisher behind my project, my book, their marketing expertise, their marketing dollars, for example, as well. And I really believe that my book has the capacity to be of interest to a major traditional publisher.
Amazing. And, we're going to be focusing today on talking about approaching a major publisher. So what do you think are probably the things that are going to make a publisher look at you? Because I know, for me, I self-published a book years ago. I never even considered approaching a publisher because I didn't think they'd be interested in it, and it seemed a little too scary. But I was totally overwhelmed by how much it took for marketing and so much time, for quite little return at that time. And so it's something for me, I'm just interested, and a lot of people are, about how do you, become that legitimate, writer and really be accepted by a publisher? What makes them look at you?
Well, again, a great question. And another one, and one of the reasons I put together the program I did was because so many authors came to me and said, okay, I'm publishing a book. I want to do it. Let's get it done. Want it done in 6 months. It's going to be great. And I know that the internet promises, there are a lot of services out there that promise sort of what I call instant soup book publishing, where, you write it really quickly, you maybe do a little editing, and you jump it out there on an ebook, publishing service or whatever, or print on demand, for example. But really, books are art. And they actually are, every aspect of their production is so important that if you're going to be successful, there are things you have to do to prepare. And you have to, this is the most important part, you have to do this whether you're self-publishing or you're going to a traditional publisher. Because as you say, a traditional publisher is going to ask to see specific things. They're going to ask to see who's your market, what's your market in terms of scope and size. You basically, I tell people, you have to actually be an entrepreneur. You have to be in the business of writing and publishing a book. Because, as I say, regardless, you're going to have to show them that you have a social media presence, that you have a following, most importantly, that you have an email list. That's by far the most important thing. The trend in publishing right now, even for traditional publishing, is low risk tolerance by the publishers. So if you're an unknown author writing your first book, You're going to have to prove to them that there's an interest in your book and a demand for your book. And the best way to do that is by creating an audience in advance while you're writing your book, and even better, to get engagement by people. One of the most popular things people do is do a crowdfunding campaign for books, because that's evidence and proof of people not just saying, yeah, I'm going to like this page, but they actually put their money down and say, I want to copy this book when it comes out. And that is becoming a real bellwether for publishers to say, have you done a crowdfunding campaign? How many people were interested? Were you able to sell any copies in advance? So yeah, regardless of which way you're going, you have to develop that presence.
Oh, that is great. Great advice. And, I think there are 100 ways to develop an audience, and we're going to be talking about a lot of them in this series. But I also think, it's changed. Back in the day, you maybe had to have a PhD, or, you had to be a real expert in your area. And now you need to prove that people are willing to listen to you, no matter what your credentials are. So.
Well, and I would just add that, those things are not unimportant anymore. Your credentials of who you are. One of the questions I ask in my assessment process is, why are you writing this book? Why are you the best person on the planet suited to write this book? So it still is about credentials. I mean, but it's not so much about proving you're knowledgeable as proving that you're suited to write the book. There's all kinds of books. If you're writing a memoir, nobody's more suited to write a memoir of your life than you, right?
Right.
So it just depends on the situation. But yeah, you need to know why you're writing it and why you're the best person to do it.
Well, that's great. Okay, so you decide you're going to get published, and you need to be telling the world about this idea or this cause, or something that you're really trying to promote. You decide you're going to go with a publisher, with a traditional publisher. What's the process? What does this look like for somebody to get involved like that?
Well, I'm going to assume here that we're talking about an unknown writer who's writing maybe their first book or their second book. Maybe have self-published before, but now they're looking for a traditional formal publisher. There's a couple of different lines in. Most publishers don't accept manuscripts in a process of what they call over the transom. So over the transom just means you come in unagented and you send a manuscript. That's generally not accepted. So the process is more about either identifying the most appropriate publisher for your work. You got to do that regardless. You can't just send your manuscript to a bunch of publishers. It's a big waste of your time and effort and money. You want to do your research and find out what book publishers are best suited to publish your kind of book. And there's lots of resources out there to do that. Another approach, and then what you do is you send a query letter and or a book proposal. And there's specific things that need to be in those. The other approach into a publisher is through an agent. And agents are just as difficult to come by as publishers, maybe even more so, because their livelihood depends on how likely they are to sell you to a publisher. So they're very, very picky. And again, agents represent certain kinds of books. So you need to do your research on agents if that's going to be your approach as well. But in all of that, regardless, you need a document that tells your story, and it's called a book proposal. And you do that, in my mind, you do that even if you're self-publishing. Our self-published authors all develop their own book proposals, and it's basically a business plan for your project if you're going to self-publish, and it's a way to get the attention of publishers and agents if you're going to go the other direction.
Amazing. And what are some of the things that might be in that book proposal?
Yeah, well, obviously a project description, a book description, a description of why you're the best person to write it, something that shows that you have an awareness and understanding of the market, both in a big picture and in a very specific sense. Who's your audience avatar? Who's the person you're writing this book for? And some kind of a description of your existing market presence. Have you been blogging for 5 years? What's the size of your email list? Do you have followers? Have you done a crowdfunding campaign that shows interest in and demand? And that sort of thing. And then also a little bit of market analysis, competitive analysis. What are the other books out there that are similar to yours? How does yours compare? What makes yours different? It's basically the same kind of a thing that is a business plan for a new business. And that's why I say think of it as a business.
Oh, amazing. So basically what I'm kind of taking away from this is that, whether it's self-publishing, going with a traditional publisher, it's a lot of work, but it's also really effective, right? You can reach quite a large audience with your message, whatever that is. If you're looking at this, and it can sound quite daunting. And, for me as a person who's, like I said, self-published a children's book years ago, A Wish for You, it was a big job. And like I said, I wasn't sure that I got, it was a return on investment. I don't know that I made my money. It was more of a labor of love. I'll look at it like that, in a way to get my message out there. So, if you're kind of thinking to yourself, I'm interested in publishing a book, but I'm not sure the path forward. I know that you've developed a course recently to help people kind of walk through this in a step-by-step manner. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. It's called the Fresh Voice Academy. My company is called Fresh Voice. And the idea of it is, I used to work with authors on a first come, first serve, basis in a, what's the word I'm trying to use? Sometimes words fail me. One-on-one.
Right.
One-on-one basis. And because there's only 24 hours in a day and only one in me, and I could really only serve a very, very small number of people at any given time. And the process can be anywhere from, 6 months to 2 years that I work with people. So I was very excited to create the Academy because it's online, it's self-directed, and it's in small chunks and components. So people can choose to do whatever it is their area of deficit knowledge is. They can take a course on author branding. They can, take a course on writing a book proposal. They can do all these things, do what they need. And I'm there as a backup to answer questions and to provide office hours. I actually have office hours just like a prof. So I'm here to support, but I can serve so many more people that way. And they can do it on their own time for a tenth the cost that it costs me to deliver the program face-to-face. So I'm really excited about it, and I hope other people will be too.
Excellent. Oh, that's wonderful. Well, I'm excited because, like I said, this entire series is to help people who want to start a movement, who really want to be creating and connecting with a lot of people on a big level. And definitely publishing is one of the oldest forms of connecting with people and on a large mass scale, and and it's evolving right now. So you are a person who's been rolling with the evolution of publishing, and so I really appreciate your insight into all the different ways that you can be published, and just some of those little tips. And I will post a link with this blog post to your academy, as well as some of the other tools that you've mentioned through this video. So thanks so much, Suzanne, and Fresh Voice Academy. And this is Katrina German.